Where's Harry gone? Is he still here? Oh,
Yep,
he's there. There he is. Yeah. Okay. Are we ready then, Matt?
Yep, you're ready to go.
Okay. Right. Good afternoon. Thank you for turning up. This is the GRAC committee meeting. And can I just run through a couple of things? We are on as a Zoom meeting. If you're not participating, can I ask you please to mute your microphones and take your video off as well. And then when you do speak, to put it back on. I'm more than happy for that. We are being live recorded, so please be aware of that we need to know all of that information. So first of all, welcome to everybody that is here. Matt, can I just ask, I think because there's some new faces around, I think I might just run through a few introductions first of all for the main people that will be participating in this particular meeting. So if I could start with the committee first. My name is John Rest. I'm chairman of this committee. Can I just pass around Christopher? You're muted. Thank you.
So, I'm Christopher Cushing. I'm a member of the group, have been since the council elections last May, and represent the Conservative group.
Thank you very much. Harry?
Yeah, Harry Blathwaite, Hickling Ward. I am now official member of this committee, I believe, and before I always used to turn up as first reserve.
Thank you very much. Pierre?
Good afternoon. I'm Pierre Butikofer. I'm the ward member for Gresham, and I'm sort of head of licensing, and I'm the new member to this particular board. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another member I don't think has logged in yet, Peter Fisher. And we do have Saul Penfold, who is apologised he can't make today's meeting. Can I ask CEO to introduce himself, please?
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Latch, I'm Chief Executive of the District Council, and I'm attending today's meeting in respect of the project governance and management framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The officers of the council, please introduce yourselves. Start with Alison.
Hello, I'm Alison Sayer. I'm the Resilience Manager for Norfolk District Council, and I am here in respect of the annual report from the Civil Contingencies team.
Thank you. Maxine.
Hi, I'm Maxine Collis, and I'm currently the Property and Programme and Project Manager for the Property Services section, but hopefully will form part of the CDU moving forward.
Okay, Kate.
I'm Kate Rawlings. I'm one of the council's project managers, and I'm also here to support the project management item on the agenda.
Okay, Kate, do you have a video picture or not?
Yeah, not at the moment, no.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right, no problem. Sometimes it's easier. Lucy.
Hi there, I'm the council's Chief Technical Accountant. I'm here today to present the Corporate Risk Register.
And finally, introduce you to the internal auditor, please, Fiona.
Hi, I'm Fiona Doddy-Mead, from Internal Audit. I work for TIA, but I'm actually here on behalf of Faye Hayward, the Head of Internal Audit for the Council.
Lovely, thank you very much. So now we all know who we all are. Okay, so we have no required substitutes because Harry is now part of the committee, and although we know about Saul, we don't need another substitute. Thank you very much. Any public questions, Matt?
None received.
Thank you. Any items of urgent business?
None received.
Can I ask anybody if you have any declarations of interest to please tell us now? No, thank you very much indeed. The minutes of the last meeting, there are 3 members present, myself, Christopher and Harry, who were present at that meeting. So obviously we'll be the only ones that can really comment if there is anything we wish to raise. Gentlemen, is there anything on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7? Lovely, thank you. Would one of you like to propose those minutes? Christopher, second. Harry, thank you. I'll sign those and we'll get them sent off. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, Item number 7 is the civil contingency report, which Alison is going to present. We have brought this one slightly forward, and we will allow the fact once Alison has finished, we finish the question, she will be leaving the meeting. I'll leave it over to you, Alison. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'm working on the assumption that people will have had a chance to look at this report before I present it, so I will not be reading it through line by line. I think people might have noticed that things have been rather busy this year, so I think it is fair to say that the civil contingencies team has been dealing with multiple concurrent incidents at time, on top of the COVID-19 response, as well as the stuff that we've been doing in terms of the EU exit transition. And there's been a great deal of reporting, both up to the Norfolk Resilience Forum and onward up to MHCLG and up to the Cabinet Office at times. So I think it's fair to say that things have been a little brisk. The reason I put this, a couple of things I put in terms of recommendations, is just to note that we do make contributions to the Norfolk Resilience Forum and to the British Red Cross on an annual basis. The Norfolk Resilience Forum, as is noted in the report, it is the local resilience forum that covers our local police area. And it is one of the ways in which we help to discharge our responsibilities as a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act of 2004, because it helps to facilitate us sharing information and cooperating with other local responders. There is a secretariat behind the Norfolk Resilience Forum, and that is one of the reasons that we pay an annual contribution to it. And there is also a training and exercising programme which accounts for the rest of the sum. This year, as last, the Council's contribution is £2,386. I also ask people to note that we make a contribution to the British Red Cross, and this is in respect of support at rest centres. This is particularly important this year, more than most, because one of the downsides of the coronavirus is that it means that we would potentially have to open additional rest centres, and we would also have to have additional staff at those rest centres in order to make sure that things were kept COVID secure. The Memorandum of Understanding with British Red Cross costs us £1,200 a year, and it means that we essentially have an additional pool of staff upon which we can draw. They would be overseen by North Norfolk District Council staff, but they would have a team leader and they would potentially have additional volunteers who have been trained by the British Red Cross and would be helping us in our rest centres. So it's very useful. There is an amendment now, which is something called the Emergency Response Cooperation Agreement, which is a change to the Memorandum of Understanding, which we have had in the past couple of years with British Red Cross, but essentially the cost to the council is the same. So, running through, we do have a couple of changes. So we have a reinvigoration of the Sea Pauling Flood Warden Liaison Group. We've been working with those this year, and the Environment Agency has acknowledged that all of the information which our flood wardens have been giving through to them as a result of either coastal or river flooding has been very useful to them. I'm pleased to see that they have been taking advantage of our information through them to them, that they have, as a result of that, on occasion actually then put through alerts on the rivers. They are going to be reviewing the alert levels at Bacton and Walcott as a result of the sandscaping scheme, because we have now got documentary evidence that it is very much definitely working and there is no need to have a different alert level. So they will be reviewing that in due course. The EU exit transition stuff that we have been doing, we now have a lead officer. The EU transition lead officer for North Norfolk District Council is the head of economic and community development, and they are tasked with leading that work going forward, but there will still be some input from civil contingencies team. I haven't put through everything that we've been doing on COVID-19 because frankly it would take up about 300 pages, and obviously Chief Executive did put through a very solid report earlier in the year noting the breadth and depth of our response. So suffice to say that there is continuing ongoing attendance at both tactical and strategic coordination group meetings through the Norfolk Resilience Forum and with a variety of internal and external cells, and that includes what is now known as the large-scale vaccination and large-scale testing cells, and there's ongoing reporting and analysis, so fairly busy. On top of COVID, as I've noted, we've had a number of other incidents in the past 12 months. I did note actually that in the past couple of years, there were maybe 5 or 6 reported incidents throughout the entire year. You will notice that there is a fairly lengthy list here. This is partly indicative of general weather conditions, but I would suspect that it is partly to do with increasing severe weather. It is partly to do with climate change, and that we should expect to see more frequent, more severe weather incidents going forward. So this is, I suspect, the shape of things to come. I note there that the Environment Agency has issued coastal flood alerts from Oldham Stanton through to Clyde on 12 occasions. They've now added a couple onto that since this report was through. We have had some flood warnings as well in November, which took people slightly by surprise. And I'm afraid that I did notice that there was a cut and paste typo in item 2.9, which should read that alerts have been in place on the Broads rivers in December of 2019 and January, and from the end of September to the middle of October in November, and now again in December this year. The flood alerts on the rivers had been reduced by the Environment Agency as a result of their response to COVID-19, but they have now been reinstated at our request. I'm not going to list all the variety of things that we've done through there. If I just skip down through to business continuity, I would ask people to note that we have 28 business continuity plans across services in the council, of which half, 14, are for teams which are undertaking NNDC critical activities. And for those people who don't know what that means, it is considered critical to North Norfolk District Council if it has a recovery time objective of 48 hours or less. So that means that it would have a significant impact upon our customers, upon our finance, upon staffing within about a week, and we would therefore want it up within 48 hours or less. And we consider that a plan is current if it has been reviewed, updated within the last 12 months. We agreed within GRAC committee 2 years ago that the target for critical plans would be 85%, and I'm very pleased to say that 100% of those critical plans are up to date. There is no target for non-critical plans, but overall we have 79% up to date. I would anticipate that the current management restructure will result in some changes, and those will need to be reflected in the business continuity plans going forward, and I'll be working with the teams to do that. So I would expect that the overall percentage of current plans will increase in the next few months. In conclusion, I think it's fair to say that the ongoing response to COVID-19, and also to a degree the upcoming EU transition, does mean that additional concurrent severe weather events are going to be a stretch, and that is one of the reasons why, as it happens, I'm actually dropping off this meeting to go and speak with my emergency planning colleagues. We all work together twice a week, and that is partly to ensure that there is increased resilience across the piece, so that if we need to, we can, with mutual support, help to backstop one another if things get a little bit skippy in future. And you see that there are no other financial implications and risks. We don't impact upon sustainability. And that is the end of my report. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them now.
Alison, thank you very much indeed. That was very, very comprehensive. Christopher, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Alison. That's a terrific report, and I appreciate everything that your team has done. May I ask, in terms of learnings from this year, is anything sort of particularly that you've learned that you're sort of playing in which helps improve your team's performance going forward?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question. You sounded you're very faint to me. Could you please repeat the question?
Has anything happened this year which has helped you learn, and have you gained any significant learnings this year which you can use again sort of going forward into 2021?
All of these significant impacts that we have had proper debriefs on, so we have debrief reports from those. What I would say is the one thing that always comes out in every single exercise, in every single incident I've ever been involved in, is communications. So no matter what you do, you can always improve communications. So there is that. Yes, and it is a matter of making sure that you have additional people around and that you really think, who is it who needs to know about this? And sometimes that there are people that you wouldn't imagine. One of the things that I did notice as I popped in the report, we have, unlike some of the other district councils, we have the advantage of having the leader of the council on our goal group, which has ensured a member perspective all the way through what we've been doing in COVID-19. That is not something that some of the other district councils have been doing. I think that gives us an advantage, and frankly, I think they made an error by not including their members as part of the decision making. So I think one of the things that I would say for learning is to always remember to tell comms and to tell your members what's going on so that people aren't taken by surprise. I think that's pretty much it, actually. The rest of it is fairly small beer.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Christopher. I have Pierre.
So I think Harry was first, John.
Oh,
Apologies.
sorry, Harry. Beg pardon, Pierre.
Thank you very much, Alison. Very full report. Just about overtopping on riverbanks. There was a slightly alarming piece in the EDP this week from an old colleague. I was just wondering if you've had anything to say regarding that piece.
Yes, we've been working with the Environment Agency for a couple of months. So we have 2 flood wardens. We have a new senior flood warden who we put in place at Ludden Bridge Boatyard because they happen to be there all the time. So they are eyes on, it's their business, it's also their home. And that means that we have additional coverage in that area. And also our senior flood warden in Potter Heigham area who is very community minded and does a great deal with the businesses and has a lot of knowledge of the Broads Rivers. They have been putting information through to ourselves within the civil contingencies team, and I had also asked if they could put those reports directly through to the flood warning duty officers at the Environment Agency when it became clear that we were not always getting the alerting that we had anticipated we might be getting on the upper parts of the River Thurne. We have had no explanation as yet as to why, when there have been flood alerts on other parts of the Broads Rivers, we haven't had them on the Buorant and the Thurne. We did raise this, I raised this several months back with the Environment Agency. They said they'd go away and have a look at it. We have since then built an evidence base with photographs and videos from Potter Heigham and from Ludden, which points to a fact there is a difference between the gauges that the Environment Agency has, which they look at, and the telemetry that they get from reps and from Hickling Broad, which is where they take their information on what's happening on the River Thurne. I have copied yourself in on some of our very specific data, which points to the fact that their gauges show that they're not anywhere close to even somewhere we'd be getting wet. And they said that everything was completely, essentially, as far as their gauges were concerned, dry, for example, between the 1st and the 6th of December. But we can point to several occasions when there was, in fact, overtopping at Ludden Bridge into the boatyard. It is a wet shed, it is to be expected, but also we had some overtopping onto the Reps Bank, which is actually Great Yarmouth Borough Council, but still, obviously, our senior flood warden covers Potter Heigham, and they are investigating that. I have to say I was a little surprised to see the article in the North Norfolk News and the EDP, because both of our flood wardens are well aware that this is being investigated by the Environment Agency, and the Environment Agency is fully engaged now in trying to come to some resolution. And you will note that I have asked very specifically what their solutions are and if they can come up with something at the moment. It is unfortunate that we are currently having to rely upon good-willed members of the public who are volunteers, and we are essentially telling a public body who has a statutory duty to give us flood alerts when there's overtopping, which is a little odd, I agree, but they are aware of it and they are addressing it.
Thank you very much, Alison. That really covers that. Thank you.
Matt, is Pierre next?
Yep, Pierre, I think you're muted, Pierre.
You're muted. You're still muted. Can you unmute him, Matt?
Yeah, should be able to.
So I'm just conscious of Alison's timing.
Yeah,
Yep,
no.
there you go.
Can you hear me
Okay,
now?
Pierre, off you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, three questions for Alison, fairly simple ones. Section 2.4, it says you're going to replace the memorandum of understanding for the response unit, and it says the agreement has been drawn up to replace the existing one. Has that been signed? Secondly, I see that you've invited the Water Management Alliance. Both Harry and I attend the Internal Drainage Board and the Norfolk Rivers Board. Have you thought about inviting a representative from those two organisations? And thirdly, in the incidents that you have described over the last 12 months, you didn't mention the Sahara Desert earlier on this last month. Thank you.
Right. Sorry, can you remind me of the first question? Because I was scribbling, but I had to swap
No.
pens,
The
Pierre.
first question
Forgive me.
was that
the memorandum of understanding. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The British Red Cross have themselves amended it, so they have. How should we put this? They have changed their method of operations. So the British Red Cross used to provide first aid cover. They are moving away from that more into what they do in terms of humanitarian basis. So they have refocused what they are doing. And as a result of the changes that they have made to their own operations and their own offer, they have changed what was the memorandum of understanding that they put around to the district councils to review to this emergency response cooperation agreement. We have only recently had the new cooperation agreement through. We've had a review of it. I anticipate that will be signed by us because it is important that we have the ability to call on people. I have held fire on doing so until such time as I can be absolutely clear that we will get what we need if we were to have a severe weather event that included coastal flooding, because there is a subtle change to the way that they say that they would endeavour to support. So it's the difference between sort of best endeavours and reasonable endeavours, and whether or not we could count upon them actually providing that service. So until such time as I'm completely assured that we will get what we need from them, we are still running on the memorandum of understanding rather than the emergency response cooperation agreement.
Okay, thank you.
In respect of your second question, which was to do
the IDB and National Rivers.
Yeah, the Water Management Alliance, the thing I mentioned there, I sort of invited them along. So the way that this works is I had a very sensible conversation with one of the engineers when we were trying to find out if there was anything that we could do to stop the rivers overtopping, and wondered if there was anything that they could do in terms of moving the water around. At that point, I discovered that he was not aware of the Norfolk Resilience Forum Severe Weather and Risk Group, and that he had not. And I did notice that when I've been going through, I had never seen a representative from the Water Management Alliance on that group. It is predominantly local authority districts, some third-party sector volunteers, and the sort of the blue lights. And I spoke to Norfolk Resilience Forum and said, look, very sensible chap, there's something that they could do there. It would be handy to have them on board, and would the Norfolk Resilience Forum want to invite WMA through? And so that's the way that happened. If there is, my understanding from the project engineer was that essentially some of the work that they were doing on in terms of the IDB almost meant that he was representing the IDBs. If that is not correct, and if there is something which the internal drainage boards themselves can do in terms of strategic flood risk, then yes, it would be sensible, and we could do the same thing again and ask the Resilience Forum if they would invite those people along. You don't want to have too many people, but if somebody has something sensible, we'll Obviously, yes. And if I can follow that up with you offline, that seems very sensible.
Thank you very much.
And the last
The
one.
Sahara Desert.
The Sahara Desert. Yeah, I did make a very brief mention to the fact that we had that was a particularly skippy series of events. So we did have the windblown sand issue. So the 25th and 20th to 27th of September, we did have the severe weather with rain and high winds. We did have flood alerts on the rivers and overtopping at some of those. We had surface water flooding.
Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. You're absolutely right. I misread that. You actually had windblown sand issues.
Yeah,
so I do apologise.
No, it's all right. We had that, and we had highways issues with downed trees and power outages. It was a little bit skippy, to be honest with you, that particular few days. And there was a full Norfolk Resilience Forum multi-agency debrief of that, as well as our own internal debrief. And hands up, due to the sheer quantity of work, some of the debrief reports have not come out yet, although the information has been collated, but it simply has not been possible to pull those reports together.
No, it's my fault. I should have. I overskipped that, and I didn't realise it was far back as September. I thought it was later on in this quarter. But thank you very much, anyhow.
Okay. I'll forgive you. There's an awful lot of things to read through.
Okay, you happy with that, Pierre?
Yep, fine. Okay. Thank you very much.
Can you turn your microphone off, please?
No, Matt can do it because I'm on my iPad.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. Matt, is there anybody else waiting?
I see Harry has a raised hand again.
Okay, Harry.
Just a quick one. When we have a storm that is purely Norfolk, can we name it ourselves in future? Give it a good name?
It almost feels like that. we were literally, everybody else in the country was like, it's fine, and we were just blitzed. And it was a surprise. And yes, I think we ought to be able to do our own Norfolk naming for what it's worth. Yes.
Yeah, we'll put a list forward, shall we, for which ones we want. Alison, I've just got a couple of very quick things. I'm conscious of your time element. On page, I just want to report a thing on page 11, the 2.8, the last paragraph. I'd just like to endorse the fact that I think what you've done there is a very good lesson to adhere to, where you have said that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has already been reported. So it's already there for us to see. We don't need to reread it. And I think that that's a good lesson to be learned in some of the papers, not to keep repeating the same projects because we can read them. My other point is on the bottom of page 11 in your other incidents in the past 12 months. And it's the one right at the bottom, the 16th of January, which refers to a flood warning on the River Wensum in Fakenham. Now, I'm not sure I've ever known the River Wensum to flood. I'm sure that there may be a record of it, but certainly not into Fakenham itself. It's pretty low. We had some investigations there with a couple of colleagues that we know. It seemed to be that one of the results of this was that there was a lot of leaves that have got down into the drains, and we understand the county council are not clearing this. Could you confirm that?
I was not aware that there had been any looking into that. I have not come across that. I know that certainly there is a jetting programme when it comes to the drains along the coast roads, and so at Bacton and Walcott, and that we had requested that programme, and also we make additional requests for those to be cleared throughout the season and in the run-up to storm season. I was not aware that that had been part of any investigations in the Fakenham area. Is that something that came from highways?
Yeah, it came about, well, it actually came about from the fire service, who were sort of around for something else, and we were talking to them. We have a colleague with them, and he said, well, there's part of your problem. Look how high that water level is down in that drain because of all the leaves. And he said, your other council are not pumping that out quick enough to get rid of all the leaves. So I wonder if it's something you could maybe just take on board and see what the situation is with that, because it did rise quite frighteningly for the people of Fakenham, who thought we were going to be renamed as Fakenham by the Sea. So we really weren't too happy about that one. But if I could just leave you to just maybe have a check on that one for me.
Yes, I will do. If I can get some information from you offline as to who you spoke to, I'll see if I can follow that up with highways.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Anybody got any other questions for Alison?
I just see Councillor Liz Withington has a raised hand.
Yes, please, Liz.
It's just a very quick one and relates to what you were just saying. The flooding in August in Sheringham was exacerbated by exactly the same problem. And we've had quite a battle to get highways to come out and jetty all the relevant gullies and different things. So I think it's probably something that needs to be addressed on a more general scale, I think.
I would note that there have been some changes in the way that highways is run at Norfolk County Council, and we do have the interesting fact that there are two separate highway engineers covering different parts of the North Norfolk district who have two separate maintenance budgets. So it means that we have to have additional conversations with them. I have requested that perhaps specifically when it comes to Bacton and Walcott, they might like to join up a little bit more, because it does seem a little bit odd to have literally something turn around in the middle of the road and go back, and but there you go.
Okay.
So yes, we will follow that up with them, but I would note that they have had some, I would say, bedding in issues with the changes within highways.
Okay.
Having said that, that we have put forward some points in our debriefs about, in particular, the numbers of and the backup for the highways on duty and out of hours call people. So when they know that there is severe weather coming, in the same way that we do, I will let our duty officer know. We will make sure that we have additional people available. They have now put those plans in place so that they have additional people available, so that they have resilience in depth when they know that there is likely to be a severe weather issue coming. So they are listening, but I will see what I can. I will certainly report back. I can't report.
No.
I can't guarantee anything though.
No, of course not. We wouldn't expect you to, but thank you very much for taking it on board.
No.
Is there anybody else, Matt? Any other questions for Alison as she needs to go?
I see no further hands raised.
Okay, fine. Alison, thank you very much indeed. Very, very comprehensive. I think we've all learnt a lot more there than we thought we knew already. But thank you again, and enjoy your next meeting. We will allow you to go.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye. All.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, moving on. Item number 8. We only need to note, by the way, her report from there's no voting or anything on that one. So item number 8 is the progress report on the internal audit activity. And this is from Fiona, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the internal audit progress, I won't go through each of the details within the report, but give you the highlights. In terms of progress against the GEAR, we have delivered 57 days, which is 43% of the plan. This is in line with the plan being staggered out across quarters 3 and quarters 4. So we have a number of audits in progress and draft reports now being issued. They will come in final version to the next audit committee. Progress is going well. It's very pleasing to see that in terms of working remotely, this is going very well. In terms of officers providing information that we need, again, this is going very well, and it's very smooth. We have been on site for a couple of the audits in terms of data, because of how the data is held, and this has gone very smoothly as well, risk assessments being completed. So we're very pleased with the progress so far. We do have resources allocated for the audits for the remainder of the year, so we anticipate to complete the plan by the end of March next year. Is there any questions on the progress report?
Matt, have we any hands?
I don't see any hands raised, no.
Oh, everybody's very happy with that one, Fiona. Again, we're just asked to note the content of that report. Okay, item number 9. Again, we stay with Fiona, and this is the internal audit report, please.
Yeah, in terms of this is the follow-up report on previous recommendations raised. There are a number of recommendations outstanding, and some of these do relate back to earlier years. We're looking through the reasoning around the recommendations outstanding. We do understand there has been some slowing in progress due to COVID. There are some areas that are now picking up. There's 33 outstanding recommendations. 22 of them are priority 2 recommendations, and no priority 1 recommendations. With regards to the priority 2 recommendations, you have the detail of each of those in the report, and there are a few that we didn't get updates for from management that we're still seeking to get. The main things I wanted to highlight in terms of the follow-up is the reasoning around some of the issues for the recommendations outstanding. If you note, some of these relate to Section 106 agreements, and that impacts on planning and affordable housing recommendations as well. And then we do have others, including the Section 106s, that are reliant on new system implementation being completed before the recommendations can be completed. As such, they will remain outstanding until such time as those systems are fully implemented. I wasn't planning to go through each of the recommendations individually, but perhaps if I can take questions.
Thank you very much. I see Pierre, your hand is up. Microphone.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Right, I'm back on my main system. Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like you to potentially give an observation on this uniform project that is going on in planning department. My concern seems to be that the planning department is now shut down for probably 2 weeks, and there's a huge reliance on this uniform project. And what are the implications if this project begins to slip? Doesn't it put planning at a huge disadvantage? Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm just coming up to those recommendations for the implementation of those. Yeah, absolutely. It does. It will have an impact in terms of timing. Management of advising sort of timing of when they expect the recommendations to be implemented. It may well be that we need some further update. I mean, it may well be that you want perhaps a more detailed response from the department on how they're going to be implementing recommendations and around those timelines.
Okay, and then I just have a follow-up question, if you don't mind, please.
Okay.
You have on the section to do with, there is no single officer has been appointed to the monitoring role. I was wondering whether we might be able to consider, and I don't know whether it's possible, and it might be showing my naivety, whether it would be possible to have a backup section, a monitoring officer. I don't know in the future if we could look at that, if that's possible. Just an observation.
Okay, Fiona.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's something that I wouldn't be able to comment on, but it is something that I can take back for management to comment on.
Okay, maybe Mr. Black could answer those questions. Maybe can you take the one before, Steve, as well, regarding the new planning issue?
So the planning system has been closed down, as Councillor Butikofer has said, for the last 3 weeks. That data transfer, I understand, has gone well. There has been a weekly update provided by the project manager, Sarah Ashurst, who's been leading that project implementation, and the system is due to be uploaded again from today. To allow those systems to be reinstated. It was a very significant data migration to allow more efficient processing of a series of planning systems and processes, so applications, tree preservation orders, conservation areas, and enforcement cases and land charges, also greater self-service and accessibility by members of the public outside of office hours. So that will be a significant change, which will hopefully allow us to address some of these outstanding audit recommendations, particularly with respect to the monitoring of the Section 106 receipts and planning conditions. And I understand that the head of planning is looking at the resource for the monitoring of planning conditions more rigidly than has been the case in the past. So I would expect that some of those long-standing recommendations will be addressed in the near future as they relate to that planning system.
Thank you, Steve. Is that okay, Pierre? Does that answer all your question? Lovely. Thank you very much. Christopher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A similar question, actually. On page 32, it mentions looking at a new procurement strategy and saying that's been delayed because the procurement officer is off on long-term sick. Do we not have a deputy who can stand in for that? Perhaps one for the Chief Executive.
Please.
That's quite a specialist role. So there is one person that fulfills that requirement for the authority. So that's something that we can look at further, but they have specialist knowledge. And I think that in terms of a revision of the recruitment strategy would allow broader dissemination of those principles more widely. But that's work that is in progress and has been delayed because that officer has been absent for a medical procedure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pierre? Pierre?
Thank you. I just want to go to the very last one to do with the recommending of an update version of the licensing register.
Yeah.
As you're probably aware, I've been working closely with the Taxi Association and the officers, and we've now virtually completed the taxi handbook. There has been a complaint or several complaints from the association, and I'm also aware that the licenses for the taxi cabs are supposed to be on the website, and it was last updated in 2018. We're now 2020, and I do understand that there is an issue of software, and I wonder whether this could be addressed in this particular piece of work, because to have the taxis registered and for people to be able to look on the website, not that many people would, but it's it's the safety for North Norfolk residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona, have you any comment or?
No, I agree
Okay.
absolutely that they should be on the website, and hopefully with the implementation of the software that would hopefully flow out of that. It is something we will be keeping a watch on, and it'll be something.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to, Pierre, can you turn your mic off, please? Microphone off. Thank you. Having looked through this report that Fiona has done, which is really very good, I am concerned that there does appear to be quite a lot of these outstanding issues. And certainly one goes back to 4 years and one a little bit more than that. I'm just wondering whether this committee should make a proposal that any of these that go over 2 years, I think the heads of service should come to this committee and explain why it's running late and give us an explanation, because my understanding is it's all very well telling the internal auditor, but they've got their role to play. They can't give us all the reasons. Now, I don't know whether, Steve, you feel that's a bit much to put on the officers, but I do feel that where you've got things that are 4 years late, there may be absolute justifiable reasons. No one is questioning it, but I do think they should be held to account to come to this committee and explain why this has gone 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years plus. If you're happy with that, I'd like to put that forward as a proposal, but if the committee are in favour of that. Steve, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'm totally comfortable with that recommendation, Chairman. One of the issues around the management restructure was to increase accountability and responsibility for operational response, because those issues were falling between a number of stools, and so that responsibility will rest with the new assistant director positions, of which there are 6 service groupings proposed. 3 of those are filled, and there are interviews scheduled over the next 4 weeks for the other 3 positions. So that I'm happy with that recommendation as you've outlined, but it wouldn't sit with a head of service, it would sit with an assistant director responsibility.
Oh, okay. We'll change that title.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've almost stolen my thunder on that.
Ah, not point. Again.
Yes, again. Can I just draw your attention to page 26 and the table which relates to those said outstanding items? There is a figure there which is 24%, which is said to be representative of the 6 outstanding in relation to 1617. Is that figure of 24% correct? That's my first question. My second question relates...
Yeah, I do apologise. That's me having a typo.
That's fine. That's
I think
fine.
it should be 12. Is it 12%?
I think it should be 12.
Yeah.
On my calculator, it's 12, but
Absolutely.
anyway,
I do apologise. Yeah.
not at all. And on page 27, paragraph 2.7, yes, the recommendations for 1617, 5 of the 6 I notice are important and they are long overdue. And coming back to your stealing my thunder, Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask whether the committee had a clear understanding of why those were outstanding for so long and whether it had a view on that. I suspect that will be encompassed within your recommendation, but I guess perhaps the question about whether you do understand why they're outstanding and whether you have a view on that might be something worth hearing.
Fiona?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just pulling up those recommendations. Absolutely. In terms of, especially the older one, again, it's in relation to the Section 106s. It's around a system implementation. So where they're looking to improve control around the processes. So with the Section 106s in terms of how they identify it and how they make sure that they are enforced. It's, do they put in the manual system to monitor that and manage it, or do they put the system in place, uniform, which would actually do that for them? So I can see why they're holding out. So rather than having to put more resource in to do something that they're planning to do and how they're going to be doing it with the system, but with the delay of the system, it means that the risk of those Section 106s not being managed in the right way is still there and it's still current, which means it's outstanding. When this system has been delayed, and it's been delayed a few times, I believe it's now been put in place. It's now, they're at the tail end of it. But during the time, so every time the system was delayed, we get revisiting it and saying, do you need to consider the alternative controls to put in place, or do you wait for this system? And until now, they have taken the view to wait until the new systems come in rather than having to then run two processes. So we can understand why they're happening, but it's just then having to sort of speed it up of where the system's coming into place. And it's, I think if they knew back then that it was going to be 2 or 3 years where they're actually outstanding, maybe we could have enforced a different decision to be made around the risks. But as it's crawled along, the outstanding risk has crawled along with it. So yeah, we do understand some of the reasoning why, and we can understand what they're doing, and we do keep a watching brief on it. So we do contact the officers every 2 or 3 months to see where they are with it, how it's going, and what they see it looking like in the future.
Lovely, thank you. Nigel, any comment?
Yes, that's a helpful answer. Thank you very much. But I think my question really was more around whether the committee had an understanding of why they were outstanding and what the issues were. And I think that really relates to the recommendation that you, or the proposal that you will shortly consider. And if you were to pursue that, then I would hope that the committee would be perhaps informed in a more timely manner with regard to the reasons why they are outstanding for so long. And with that knowledge, you might have a more comfortable feeling about whether that's appropriate or not. So it is about, I think, improving that communication between those heads of department that are responsible for the long outstanding items, and you having or have the opportunity of forming a view about the acceptability of it. So from an observer's point of view, I would be supportive of the proposal that you are considering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to raise any questions before we put something together, Matt?
Councillor Liz Withington has a raised hand.
Yes, please, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question to do with this 106 situation. I noticed the recommendation is to do with really once the 106 has been agreed and the trigger points, etc. I just wondered if the auditing process takes into account how that those 106s are reached in agreement and whether that comes into it at all, and whether it's appropriate that that's audited as to how that happens.
Absolutely. We audit it at different points in the process. So we'll look at the planning applications. When we're looking at the planning applications, we will look to see, as part of that particular application, is a section 106 relevant? Has it been considered? Has it been gone through the proper process to go to the right departments to take it further? We then do a separate audit on section 106s to see, have the section 106s come through from, how have they come through? How are they being managed in total? And then how are they being utilised as well, so that they're not just sitting in a bank account for many years and don't go to the right parish or don't go to the right area. So we do look at it through the whole process, but we do it within sections depending whether how it's coming in. We also look at them as part of the affordable housing. So if they come in as a need to go towards the affordable housing, how do affordable housing department then receive it to make sure it's seamless and to make sure we're not just doing it piecemeal? So yeah, all aspects of it do get covered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Liz. Anybody else, Matt?
I see no further hands raised.
Okay, fine. So going back to this proposal, if the committee are sort of happy about this, I think we need to put something together, and I'm happy to take some other views of people. So far, I'm sort of looking at Steve's recommendation that it's not the heads of service, but the assistant director's role. So I'm thinking that the assistant director responsible for the job, which I notice is the title that we use, that when the due date exceeds 2 years, they should be called to the GRAC committee to explain the reasons. Is that everybody clear with that? Do you want more into that? Or Matt, are you got that?
Yeah, the wording seems fine. Obviously, if you wanted to make that as a recommendation, it would require someone to second it and to vote on it. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But I just want to check the wording first. If everyone is, I don't want to make it too wordy, but I want the 2 year bit so that we can at least identify them, call them in, and at that opportunity, we can then decide whether they come back. If it's still there in a year's time, then obviously we've got an audit trail for it. So if we're happy with that, subject to correct spellings and the wording, etc., I'm happy to propose it if any other member of the committee would second. Christopher, thank you. Can we take a vote on that, please?
Yeah, so I'll just do a roll call.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Councillor Rest?
4.
Councillor Cushing?
4.
Councillor Blathwaite?
4.
And Councillor Boutikofer?
4.
Okay, so that's unanimously agreed.
Right, thank you very much for that. I think that will give us some more information as we need it. Okay, that was item 9. Right, item 10, I think we're on to now, which is Mr. Blatch. It's down to you for the project management draft report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this item is around revised project management and governance arrangements. The report seeks to respond to the audit recommendations of Audit Report NN 2001 Project Management Framework conducted in 2019 and detailed in the preceding report. The new management structure agreed by full council on the 23rd of September this year seeks to increase and strengthen project governance and management arrangements, to provide greater clarity of project objectives, project delivery, and closure/learning. The proposals include establishing a corporate delivery unit which will promote and support strong project governance at both an officer and member level. There has therefore been a review of the project governance framework and the project management guide, which are tabled here as draft documents outlining the thinking of an improved and strengthened approach to the identification and delivery of small, medium and large projects by the authority. Essentially, the council needs to do fewer things better and track and record progress, as well as develop its approach to learning and the experience of project delivery, so that corporately we grow and develop through continuous improvement. The proposed framework and guide, as well as the proposed changes to Overview and Scrutiny Committee through the introduction of the new panels, aligned with the corporate plan themes, and a new proposed Major Projects Cabinet Working Party, are all intended to increase ownership and scrutiny of medium and large-scale project proposals, both in their conception, their development, and their delivery, and ultimate completion and learning thereafter. The papers today are presented for discussion as draft proposals, and I would welcome any questions or comments that any members might wish to ask. Both Maxine Collis and Kate Rawlings from the Corporate Delivery Unit are also on the call and may be able to assist me in answering any questions that you might have. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, we're going to open this for debate. I'm going to ask Councillor Cushing first of all to start this, because he has prepared a report which he very kindly, I know, has shared with the Chief Executive, so there shouldn't be too many surprises. But
no, I'm grateful for Councillor Cushing sharing that with me last night, and I have shared that with Maxine and Kate earlier today. So I hope I am able to respond to many of the questions which Councillor Cushing might wish to ask. Thank you.
Okay, Christopher, I will turn my microphone off and leave it to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's a bit like a busman's holiday for me, actually, because for those who don't know, I've been a professional project manager at Aviva and program manager at Aviva for 20 odd years now, I suppose. So probably know a little bit about this subject. And it's very interesting to compare this with sort of the project world that I'm used to. I looked through the document. It does seem to have a bit of a focus on governance, but I do think there are some questions in a number of areas which I raised in there, which I'm happy to walk through around it, but I think it's probably fairly weak in terms of proposals and governance. So if you like, I'm just happy to take those as sort of the report I wrote last night and just pick out some of those points. I have to say it's probably not exhaustive, so we might want to discuss, Mr. Chairman, what we do off the back of it. But anyway, I'll take them as they come, if you like. The first one I had on page 53 was that the project proposal, and it stated down there that the proposal will be written by the project manager. Now, certainly in the world that I come from, that would never be the case. If you like, this is pre-project. So the idea of it's really the person who owns the delivery, who's got the, and what is accountable for it taking forward, would normally be the person who would be responsible for drafting that proposal. So in this instance, it would probably be something like the sponsor or somebody closely related to that business line who would take that up. And indeed, if you look down the sort of second paragraph down, it says a project sponsor is the key member of the team and ultimately responsible for the project. So again, begs the question why they would not do that. And I think, as I may point out further on down, in the world I have, once you wouldn't actually appoint a project manager until actually approval's been given to go ahead with the project manager, and that's one person you'd appoint along with the rest of the project team. Probably the first one, to be fair, but it's certainly, I think we're looking at sort of pre-project at this stage. So I'll draw breath there, Mr. Chair, if anyone wants to answer that particular question. Otherwise, I'll be down.
Steve, do you want to come in on that? Your microphone's off. Steve?
Yeah, that's here. Sorry,
okay. That's okay.
I double clicked, I think. So there is a difference. I respect Councillor Cushing's background experience, but obviously the district council is essentially a political organisation. So it's advised by officers, but each of the major parties have their plans, ambitions laid out in their manifesto, and where there is a council with a majority control, they deliver against their objectives and manifesto pledges through a corporate plan. So those visions are shared and rightly discussed, and then conversations take place between the lead group and cabinet and portfolio holder in terms of proposals, and then there is a sharing with officers to to make some of those things happen. So if we look at the current priorities around affordable housing or climate change, tree planting, there is a separation of roles and responsibilities between a portfolio holder or cabinet member who would, I think we would see as being the project sponsor, accountable for delivery and reporting, but they wouldn't deliver that project themselves. There would be a team of people that would do that through a project manager. And I understand the point that's made about when you would identify a project manager, but the project manager, I think in this context, would be seen as an officer who would be tasked with developing the proposition and then would get sanctioned to proceed through cabinet, possibly through overview and scrutiny, and then would own that project moving forward. And what the governance structure and project management and proposal outlines is that relationship between the sponsor, who is accountable for explanation, ownership, sharing and reporting on a periodic basis, and the project manager, who would ordinarily be an officer for a medium or large scale project. And we're trying to separate those functions and roles along those lines.
If I could, thank you. I have to say, of all the points I've listed, that's probably the one I probably get least precious about in terms of that. And I do accept your point in terms of if the project manager is responsible for delivery, but ultimately the sponsor is accountable. And I think there's a difference between the two. The other point, I'd actually normally somewhere around the initiation, it doesn't really flow in anyway, but I do think somewhere around there, you might want to give consideration to GDPR issues, and particularly in terms of you are actually handling customer data anywhere. That's something that's certainly very prevalent in the organisation which I work for, about making sure you've got a report and safeguards around that. That doesn't really flow. You'd normally start thinking about that at the start of a project. So I just probably throw that one in there for your thoughts around that.
So I think for projects that involve data and individual data, so IT projects, so council tax, revenues, electoral registration, some elements of the uniform project for planning upgrade, those things would obviously be given consideration in the project scope, but they possibly wouldn't be preeminent in the delivery. That would be an element rather than a factor to be considered rather than a discrete or distinct outcome.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's just making sure you're cognizant of it and how you're going to consider it and make sure to put safeguards. That's fine. If I may go to page 57, the other thing which I did a little bit bemusing to me was a little bit around a business case, saying that a project essentially is given a thumbs up and then we worry about the business case. In my world, it would be the business case and indeed the benefits realisation plan would be part of that initial project initiation. No, I don't. Maybe there's obviously the political organisation, so one comes before the other. But
essentially, it is a two-stage approach. I mean, historically, the authority would have gone through a capital bid process during this time of year on an annual basis, and those things would have involved a presentation and a request as part of the budget process for some capital funding, particularly to support project delivery. More recently, those things would be internally facing activities around IT investments, perhaps a replacement of a vehicle for the countryside service, or changes to our operational assets. More recently, over a number of years, the council needs to respond to funding opportunities, and so those windows don't drop naturally into our bidding cycle, and that's under a number of government and quasi-government organisations such as the Local Enterprise Partnership that obviously has government money bestowed upon it, and the Environment Agency, but we have to bid against their timescales rather than timescales which we are in control of. And so there's almost a two-stage sign-off. There's a conversation by the controlling group or the cabinet, or possibly through overview and scrutiny from other members of the council about what might be a good idea and would deliver against the council's objectives. And that is no more than perhaps a seed that needs to be planted, and some scope put around that, around reach, objectives, delivery, outcomes. And then at that stage, some consideration is given to the affordability or the need for resource, both finance, staff, capacity, external partners or contractors to deliver against that objective. And I think it's at that case, Councillor Cushing, that we would see that as the business case being presented for sign-off rather than the first early doors. And I noticed that Maxine's got her hand up, so I don't know if she wants to add something there. Are you happy for Maxine to comment?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Or contradict me, whatever, I don't know. So go ahead, Maxine.
No, it wasn't to contradict you, but the purpose of it going to business planning group initially was not to give approval. It's only approval to proceed. And this was to prevent things being brought forward to cabinet that haven't been fully developed or are an unknown, and also that the business planning group provides a sort of informal forum to look at ideas that may be worthy, may need parking because they might come up for possible funding opportunities. They may also say, actually, you know, these two projects could be combined, bring us back a proposal combining projects. So it's a sort of first stop. It's not the approval. The approval is only by cabinet, but we didn't want to waste officers' time creating a business case, which is obviously a bigger piece of work, to take to the business planning group for them to say, no, we don't really want to do that at this moment. The timing's wrong. We need to focus on other things. So that is the purpose of that initial stop, and you wouldn't have that necessarily in a business situation, but it does allow to focus on the projects they really want to take forward to you know, deliver the corporate objectives.
So it's a sieve, basically a sifting process to prioritise and to assess competing demands, so that we're only investing capacity in the detailed business case for those projects which have a chance of being supported or considered worthy through a political process.
I just note we appear to have lost.
I think we might have lost Councillor
We
Cushing. Yes, we might
seem to
have
have
done.
lost Councillor Cushing. Obviously, he was happy with your replies. I think we'll. Any idea, Matt, what's happened?
I don't know. Either he's back now. I'll just let him in.
Okay.
Sorry, Christopher, I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure what happened there. So
I think that's my end, I think. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So what we were saying is that it's a project sifting or prioritization process. So there's not a lot of resource wasted in terms of developing detailed business cases. So it's a sort of pre-scrutiny or prioritization process, so that we only concentrate detailed officer resource on developing detailed business cases for projects which have some prior approval, rather than expending a lot of resource developing a proposition that then isn't supported.
That's fine. That makes sense. Doing that. Thank you for that. The only other thing I just mentioned, on page 57, it does say that the whole project costs need to be understood at the outset. I mean, I know something to the debate of project managers all my life is that normally when you start a project, you can't always be fully confident of what it's going to cost up front. Probably more on infrastructure projects you might do, but really just an observation.
I think we would absolutely agree with that. But I think in terms of recent experience of a number of projects that the council has sought to deliver in recent times, there has been concern about optimism bias and whether the costs that were identified were artificially low or contrived to present a positive business case, which then wasn't actually then the reality. And so this process is intended to be more robust moving forward based on that experience.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Then just a comment read on page 59 about whether it should be an assistant director or whether it should be a policy, a portfolio holder, it should be the sponsor. I'm not sure I have a definitive answer to that one, but I think it might be something when you get particularly large projects. I was thinking about you might want to have the portfolio holder being responsible.
I think that is the proposal for certainly for a large project and some medium projects, for a cabinet member portfolio holder to be the project sponsor.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So there's political accountability for
Yeah.
delivery. And then if there is concern raised through overviewing scrutiny committee or indeed through the cabinet working party, that sponsor will be the accountable person and the conduit through which messages are delivered back to the project manager and the project team to address any slippage or challenges or issues which are identified or experienced.
Okay, thank you. My area of principal concern, I have to say, was around the delivery section. So what I wasn't sure of whether there are plenty of other documents which sort of fill in the gaps on page 60 to 63 around project delivery, because I mean, literally libraries of books have been written on how you deliver projects, and certainly in my experience, that's where you get that's the challenging part. So I did mention a sort of a number of points down there. First off, in Project World, as I think I put in my notes here, there are two methodologies that you use. One is waterfall, where effectively you deliver everything in a big bang. So you go through cycles of a project life cycle in order to get your final outcome, and at the delivery point, it all goes live at the same time. The other one is something known as agile, which is effectively incremental delivery. You deliver small slices at a time, particularly suited to IT deliveries, which is more my world, I guess. Something that was certainly raised in GRAC before around this particular issue. So I just wondered, is the agile method actually in the council's project management toolbook? Do they use it? That's probably one key question. There's nothing about the project life cycle in terms of what it would normally be. So we talked about initiating a project. You then have to gather your requirements, design how you can fulfill those requirements, go and build it, go through lots of types of testing in order to make sure it all works, hangs together, then put it live. Nothing around that in there. You mentioned around here how you put a plan together. Well, that again is a very waterfall type plan. Fairly surprised to see the mention of Microsoft Project, because I don't know. Microsoft Project is an iteration of MS Excel. Certainly I haven't touched Microsoft Project in probably about 10 years, I shouldn't think, and I don't know any of my friends and colleagues in my world who have touched that tool either. There are easier ways of doing it, I would suggest, than just going to that tool in order to do that around there. No particular mention of budgeting and monitoring budgets. That's normally sort of something that fills a lot of my life at work, how you do that, keeping an eye on it. And the other principal thing is around what they call the gating process. Now, Waterfall is based very much on Prince 2, which I think was developed in the public sector about 20 odd years ago, plus 25 years ago. And if you go through Prince 2 method, that is all about gating. So what gating is that you draw down your funding on an incremental basis. So if you're going to say have a splash, for example, it might be a good example. You're going to spend £12 million on that. Well, you draw down your funding on X months will give you, I don't know, £2 million of funding. That funding will give you how much of building, I don't know. In IT world, it's actually how much you get for it. You say what you're going to get for your money and then go off and do it. And then you come back next time saying, all right, I'll have my next filling of funding, please. And this is what we've done. And so nothing mentioned about that, which I find, again, sort of unusual. So I don't know whether we intend to adopt that process in there, but I would strongly recommend doing it because it certainly adds to an awful lot to the governance and control of projects doing that as well. So I'll pause for breath here. That's quite a lot in there. So I don't know if you or somebody else would like to sort of any thoughts, comments on that.
So I don't know whether Kate wishes to comment, because I think Maxine might have just had to step out. The council has experience of both at Prince 2 and agile methodologies. You've acknowledged, Councillor Cushing, that there are a diversity of projects which the council delivers in terms of scale, reach and outcomes. So some are internally facing systems based, which might be more about your experience, whereas others are infrastructure or physical development outside, which raises a different range of issues in terms of planning permission, adverse weather, construction challenges and all of those things. So there's disciplines and principles around all of project management is sound, but the council has a mix and match approach around those, and Prince 2 and agile methodologies are ones which the authority has provided. I think there are a series of software packages which can also support project governance and management and implementation, and the council has used Microsoft Project, and I think some key project managers are comfortable and experienced in working with that system, but that doesn't mean to say it's the only system that can be used. Kate, do you have any comments that you'd wish to make or comment further in that regard, please?
Yes, just obviously echo a lot of what's already been said. Councillor Cushing, obviously we're aware there's a whopping great big book on how to run projects by Prince 2, and an equally whopping great big book on how to run projects using Agile that we can't begin to, recreate in this document. But also to echo the fact that, especially when we're talking about the large projects, is we're bringing in people who are experienced project managers at this stage who are familiar with these methodologies. And this document is more towards pushing people to how the council runs its projects, which is more about the approval process and perhaps linking in with the finance parts that the council already has processes in. And the other point is also we've got InPhase coming online, and it has project management capabilities, and obviously that's something that we will be moving to use more in the future.
That's fine. I appreciate the guidelines. It's not exhaustive, so I just wanted to make sure, because it doesn't make reference to those in here, that those weren't being missed or overlooked. I didn't think they probably were, but I thought it was worth highlighting.
No, I'm grateful for that comment, and it's something that I'll discuss further with Maxine and Kate to whether we need to expand to make those references so that those points are picked up.
That's
okay,
fine.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that probably covers the main points I listed down there. So
That's very kind. Thank you very much. Believe it or not, I did actually have some questions, but they all seem to have been answered, either by Steve or, in fact, Kate just answered a couple of the questions that I was going to ask. So I'm not proposing by any means to go over everything else again, just to get those sort of answers done.
Have a couple of raised hands, Chairman.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we have Councillor Angie Fitch-Tillett, followed by Councillor Nigel Dixon.
Okay. In that order then, please.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and thank you for letting me speak. I went through this proposal with great interest and compared it to the various schemes that I've been involved in the last 11 years, I think it is, something like that, most of which have been overseen by Steve, who's been a great help to us all. The last one, obviously, is our award-winning soundscaping. Sorry to keep boring on about it, but it was 19 million quid's worth. I don't know whether Mr. Cushing has been doing anything of that huge amount of money spent on the public purse. However, the proposal that you have in front of you is absolutely textbook. It is how we worked through not only soundscaping, but also the big chroma scheme that we did beforehand. We've had a management board. The way that it works through local government is obviously very different to the big real world out there. I've had experience in both, but I really cannot fault it. And I know I'm not a member of this committee,
Okay.
but just a substitute, but I would just commend it to you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may recall, I think it was your July meeting when I attended and had, I think, quite a bit of input with regard to what I believed we needed to do in terms of refining our project management processes. And the most important thing for me was ensuring that we pick up on and learn from the lessons of the past, because despite Councillor Fitch-Tillett's success with projects, we unfortunately have experience of projects that haven't gone very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it is those that we do need to learn the lessons from. I'm not going to express a view one way or another about how the model might benefit from change. I'm no expert to be able to do that. But what I would ask is that for those changes that have been proposed, that whatever the final version of this might turn out to be, that there is an exercise at the end which basically looks at those lessons that need to be learned from the past and ensure that the new model will stop those from being repeated in the future. And that's principally what I would like to ensure happens at some stage along the way in approving this new model. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dixon. I think in fairness that Steve did highlight the fact that this has come about because of previous projects, etc., and this now needs to be the way that we move forward with this situation. Matt, is there any other hands before we sum this one up?
No, I see no further hands.
Okay, fine, thank you. Steve, yes, please.
Thank you. To respond to Councillor Dixon, even when this document is approved, it won't be a static document. It is a document that, in conjunction with our external auditors and internal auditors, we should be reviewing every couple of years to make sure that it's a live document, that we are learning from our experience and we are learning from positive and not so positive project delivery experiences. We need to do that as a open-minded corporate body that learns from both its positive experiences and its mistakes.
Okay, that's quite useful because you've actually just answered the question I was going to say to you. Did you want to sum it up? So I think that's what you've done.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, so as a committee, we are asked to review this, which I think we have done fairly. We've certainly commented on it, and thank you, Councillor Cushing, for your very in-depth questions on that. And I think from most people's point of view, it seems to have picked up a lot of other people's thoughts that I've been told about. And we understand this is a draft. We fully accept that. And so therefore, we will await the final report as and when it is done so that we can, maybe other people can then have a look at it. I presume there's no date on this yet when you're hoping to have it done?
So we're looking to introduce this from early next year alongside the management restructure. There's obviously the considerations being given to the panels under Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that will require some revision to the Constitution, which will need to be taken through the Constitution Working Party. But this is about strengthening the Council's organisational governance moving forward.
Can I just, I'm not going to hold anybody down, but when you say early next year, are we talking about in the first quarter? You would hope.
That's correct, yes, the first quarter of 2020.
Okay, it would be nice if we could sort of minute that at least that way. If you don't do it, we can call you back and ask you why.
No, you're welcome. That's absolutely fine. Noted.
Okay. You're happy with that. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for the committee for listening to that. Went on a little bit longer, but that was good. We're going to carry on. I don't know, Steve, if you need to leave, that's perfectly. And Kate, you're more than welcome to leave. We're just going to finish off the committee meeting now. But thank you very much for your input.
I'm happy to stay, Chairman. Thank you.
Please do. Please do. Okay, we now move on to item 11, the Corporate Risk Register. This is for Lucy, please.
Thank you. So this is your December update of the Corporate Risk Register. So as this is a quarterly update, I don't propose to talk in any huge detail through each of the risks, but I will just draw your attention to what has changed since your last update. So anything that has changed, I've coloured the text in green, so hopefully that's a little bit easier for you guys to see. So I'll just start from the top, looking at the financial risks. So extra actions that we have on here. So the first one relates to the sales fees and charges compensation scheme, which is being run by MHCLG. So there's references here made to at the last budget monitoring, which was period 6, looking like we had a £400,000 deficit for the financial year. Just by way of update, that deficit looks to have been reduced now, as we've had the first tranche of funding from that sales fees and charges compensation scheme actually come in now. And that first allocation was £416,000. So that almost exactly balanced off the deficit that we were forecasting. So that's obviously good news. We do continue to monitor the expenditure and loss of income relating to the COVID pandemic. And we are still sending regular updates to MHCLG to keep them in the loop with things. Our next one is actually due at the end of this week. So they are getting very current information. They're then using those figures that we give them to make decisions around any sort of reimbursement schemes and further funding that the council needs. So it's really good to see that I think 100% of councils have been regularly updating the government on that, and we will continue to do so. So the other action that was here was around running a briefing session. So the Overview and Scrutiny Committee had specifically requested a briefing session, which we then opened up to all members. So that was regarding the medium-term financial strategy and the Cabinet's current income generation and savings plans. And we had a workshop inviting members to generate their own ideas and contribute those, which was quite successful. So those savings ideas and plans will go forward now and be looked at by the finance team in conjunction with the relevant service managers to look at the feasibility, viability of any of those plans and to work those in with the existing proposals. And we would look to report that back to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The detail of that reporting will be obviously discussed with the committee itself to make sure it meets their requirements for that information. The other new item on this risk was around the spending review. So since our last update, the spending review, the one-year spending review has been delivered by the Chancellor, which is great news. And the impacts of that spending review are now going to be modelled into the medium-term financial strategy and also into the budget report for the 21-22 financial year. So that will go to full council in February. So that will come forward very soon, but the team are working on modelling the implications of that at the moment. Obviously, the next big item on that particular agenda will be the provisional local government finance settlement, which we're expecting, fingers crossed, to be at some point next week. And that will give us some more further certainty around the funding for next financial year, although not the future years, as we only had a one-year spending review. So that risk will be downgraded eventually when we have our multi-year spending review, which we're looking at for next financial year. So that's the financial risk. So moving on to the operational risks, we've got something about channel shifting in there. There was references to the digital transformation programme. Those have been taken out. And we're now looking at digital service improvement instead, which is going to be very much sort of led by the services and what the services require, rather than led from a must be digital by default sort of position, which will hopefully have improved buy-in and then working that in as part of the wider digital strategy for the council. And the only other updates were around the business grant schemes, which slightly further down. So the dates of those actions have been just pushed back ever so slightly, just to take into consideration the latest grant schemes that have been as a result of lockdown 2.0, which obviously has had a knock-on effect in the timescales for delivering those. So I'm of course happy to take any questions on the actions. If it's on an action that I'm not myself action owner, I'm also happy to take that back to the action owner to get a fuller response should the committee require it. And obviously I'll circulate that to the whole committee, but I shall do my best to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Very, very detailed. Matt, do we have anybody want to ask any questions? Everybody
doesn't appear so. No, I see no.
Everybody understood that, can ask questions on it if they were asked. So that's very good. Obviously, well done, Lucy. If you can present it like that, nobody has any questions. They've worked out that they understand it. Okay, we are merely asked to monitor for the, oh, sorry, we're asked to review and to note it, that we have done so. Okay, item 12 is the next one on our list, which is an update on the actions. That's down to you, Matt, please.
Yeah, there's not really much to note here, just to say that there's no outstanding actions from the last meeting. I think it was noted that the item on project management today was a result of a recommendation made by the committee at the June meeting. So you can see that essentially the recommendations are being followed up on, which is good to see. So thanks to the officers involved in that. I think that's really all in terms of the update. If you're happy to me to move on to the work programme.
Yes, please, if you would. Lucy, you're still with us. We might need you for this.
Just to note, I think we were expecting originally to have the EY annual audit letter at this meeting and the final statement of accounts. There has been some ongoing delays, I think, with EY, and I think Lucy probably is the best person to explain to the committee where we are with those.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that now if you
yes,
want,
please.
Chair. Okay. So there's two outstanding issues with EY at the moment. So we have the 18-19 accounts final sign off and the 19-20 accounts final sign off. So they are two separate things. 18-19 sign off is imminent. I think we've worked through the last outstanding issues with those due to sort of internal resourcing issues that has taken us slightly longer than we expected it to. So the annual audit letter will be coming to your next meeting rather than this one. So apologies for that. The 19-20 audit. So as per the regulations, should have been signed off by the 30th of November. So this is slightly later than normal due to the COVID pandemic. The decision was taken to delay that. Unfortunately, EY, along with a lot of other audit firms, are experiencing ongoing resourcing issues themselves. And this has caused a significant delay to audits up and down the country. So this morning I was sent some data from PSAA Limited, who are the company that appoint our auditors on our behalf. And it looks like 55% of councils missed the deadline of the 30th of November for having their audited accounts signed off and published. So we are one of those councils. Our audit is actually not scheduled to start until the end of February. So at the moment, we're looking at the last week in February, the first 2 weeks in March for that completion. And then unfortunately, we'll miss the deadline for the March committee for getting that signed off. So obviously we'll have to do that then either at a future meeting or perhaps we'll have to have one just as a one item meeting to get that all agreed before June. But we'll discuss that near at the time. Obviously, that's not ideal for us because we will be finishing signing off the 19-20 accounts just before then having to put the 2021 accounts together. So we'll all be a bit fatigued, I think, by that point. But if we tried to bring that date forward any earlier, then that would clash with the budget setting process, which arguably would be worse for us resource-wise. I think for me, the issue that we're then going to have is what is the knock-on effect for the 2021 accounts and the audit. I know that EY are of the opinion that they are expect to catch up by the time we get to that audit process. So we have to sort of take that as read at that point. But it is interesting to note that 45% of councils missed the 18-19 sign-off deadline. And this is all councils, not just those with EY. And that has obviously raised to 55% for 19-20. So something is going to have to happen to make sure that number then comes down for the 2021 clearly. So we will obviously ask EY to keep us up to date with their plans for resourcing those audits appropriately and making sure that we would look to have that signed off by the deadline. But for me personally, I'm just looking forward to getting the 19-20 accounts out of the way first before we get to that particular hurdle. But it's just something I want to put on your radar because I'm sure July will be here before we know it. And we'll be looking forward to seeing whether the audit has been completed by that point or not.
Sorry, So yes, thank you very much, Lucy, for that. I mean, you know, with all due respect, I don't think EY are the only auditors with this problem, are they? It's a fairly national, from what you read, and I'm sure that, you know, they would defend their corner no end. I mean, we are obviously tied into contracts with auditors, which we're not here to discuss at the moment. Just out of curiosity, is there such a thing as a break clause when you employ a firm of auditors that you can review what they've done?
So PSAA Limited hold the contract on our behalf. So it's a slightly strange procurement. So it was done on behalf of 97% of all councils. And the idea was it achieves economies of scale. So eventually that results in a saving to the taxpayer. So hence why 97% of council signed up for it. To my knowledge, there isn't a break clause within that contract because we are not party to the contract, that we can't look at the key performance indicators and any kind of break clauses that might be within that. But my understanding is there's not anything. Separate to that, I understand that PSAA are unwilling to levy penalties against audit firms for lack of timeliness in completing their audit. I think they're very much of the opinion that as long as the quality is maintained or improved, then that is the most important thing. So if that delays the completion of the audit, I think in their opinion that seems to be, you know, fair. I mean, it remains to be seen if this is a problem that is going to continue sort of perpetually. Then I would suggest that they need an alternative view. This procurement is opt-in. So if we decide, you know, nearer the time that we are still experiencing issues, then we could look at that decision in light of that. But my understanding is it's a 5-year contract with no break clause.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other committee? Harry, I see your hand.
Yeah, on another authority in which I represent Norfolk District Council, EY have completed actually their external audit, but they have raised their price for next year to what I wrote down as well, I can't tell you what I wrote it down as, but it was not to encourage re-engagement as far as I could tell. It was an amazing price rise for a small authority, and I was wondering if we were likely to face the same.
Yeah, so I haven't had the formal fee proposal, so that will be done after the audit planning is undertaken, and it will encompass a number of factors such as you know, our kind of working papers and how long they expect to take to complete the audit, and historical experience of dealing with us as clients. But as a general rule, what we are seeing across the board is that audit fees have increased above the threshold which was stated in the original bids. Obviously, people are free to make their own conclusions about that. But yes, it's not ideal when the original purpose for most people entering that contract would be to have cost savings kind of realised. I suppose from my personal opinion, I would rather have an audit that was adequately resourced and that was the quality that we expected. And if that means we have to pay more for it, then I would be in favour of that. I think value for money is just as important as the physical number of pounds that you pay somebody. So that would be a consideration for me personally. But I don't think it is uncommon to see quite significant price rises across the sector with audit, external audit at the moment. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that continues.
Okay, thank you. Pierre.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, does it affect the council or other councils if there are unsigned audits that go back maybe 2 years, 3 years? Does that affect, I know, I was going to say, does it affect our ability to raise funds? But I know the government have tried to cap that, but are there any drawbacks with not having signed off accounts going back a couple of years? Thank you.
So I think before this happened, we all assumed there would be. And then when it did happen, it turns out no. So I don't think there'd been previous to this issue with audit resourcing, there hadn't really been a problem with councils not publishing their accounts in time. It was a case of, all hands on deck until it was done. So I think the only thing that could have been done was we could have been named and shamed on a list of councils that were late. But there is no way for the government to withhold funding, and there's no detriment that I could see monetarily or otherwise really from unsigned accounts, and particularly at the moment, whereas it turns out the majority of councils have at least unsigned accounts for the last financial year for reasons that are not of their own making. So I think it would be fairly unreasonable for there to be issues regarding that. But yes, there's nothing detrimental that's happened to us as a result of that.
You okay with that, Pierre? Okay, thank you. Is there any other committee member that has anything else they'd like to say? I do want to raise one small thing. This is our work programme, and what I'd like to propose again through the committee is whether this committee could have view or sight of a list of NNDC's commercial assets and their valuation from the audit point of view. Now, I don't know whether that's something Lucy could provide us with, and I'm happy the fact, do we need this as a proposal to add to the workload?
Just before Lucy comments, I think, yeah, if you did want to add this to the work programme, you would have to take a vote on it to formally add it. Yeah. Okay.
Lucy, is it an unreasonable request?
It's a perfectly reasonable request as far as I can see. What I think I would look to do is sort of understand what you as a committee want to get out of that information, and then I can present it in a way that is useful, and perhaps provide some additional things that you might want to enable sort of decisions to be made, depending on what your reasons for requesting that are.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm quite happy to do that.
Anybody else on the committee? Any comments on? Do we think it would be a useful tool to have?
Can I just ask, Chairman? Yeah. The purpose. What are we actually? Yeah, I think Lucy summed it up. What are we actually going to do with that information once we have it?
Well, I think from an audit point of view, it's always useful to know exactly what the authority has in its assets. They don't raise finance out of these assets. I couldn't tell you at the top of my head what the list of those assets are. I'm sure we can find them. I'd like to know what the updated valuation of them are, because values change very, very quickly. And also, on the other side of it, if we've had, and I'm not suggesting we have any of those assets for a reasonable amount of time, and they don't seem to be worth what they were worth at the time, is it something that the audit should be really looking at to see whether we hang on to them? I don't know how many there are. I don't believe there's a book full, but I think it might be an exercise, if one feels under our remit of governance and audit, that we should be looking at. Steve, I don't know whether you've got any feeling about that.
So I was just going to type something in the chat, Chairman.
Okay.
Renata Garfoot, as our asset strategy manager, she has a regular, I don't know if it's annual, I don't know if Lucy knows, but there is a insurance valuation that's undertaken for us so that we have a book value of our assets. That doesn't mean to say that that reflects their commercial value if they are then placed on the market for disposal. But if they were to be lost through any insurable event, we would obviously be paid out on the basis of those asset valuations. But Lucy might be able to add more detail, but I know that Renata is required to maintain such an asset value register. Lucy.
Yeah, so as part of the statement of accounts, all properties that we hold as investment properties have to be valued each year. They're valued at fair value, which is probably a slightly better value for your purpose, I think, than the reinstatement value, which is what is done for insurance purposes. But we could probably provide both. I think that when SIPFA brought in the requirement in the last couple of years to produce an annual capital strategy, one of the things they wanted to drive at was exactly what you'd mentioned, Chair, around if the value of those assets fluctuates, particularly to the negative, what is the plan for restoring that or not? So obviously that's something that members, should rightly ask what our plans are. And I think it would be appropriate for this committee to ask that sort of questions. I don't think that would be beyond your remit.
Okay.
So I can provide that.
Any other committee member? Any comment of any feedback on that? Is it something you think we need or should have? Pierre?
I was just thinking, is it just relating to commercial type properties, or would we have a cutoff of less than, I don't know, 100,000, 50,000?
No.
Anything below that?
No, all of them. All of them.
Okay.
All of them.
Okay.
It's easier if we get all of them, and there won't be that many. We can then determine, well, that's fine. That's a small amount. It may be the very small ones that have actually done very, very well. I'm just a bit concerned that there may be something in there. I'm not trying to find anything, but just to have a look at it, if it can be done. I think it might be more work to take them out if they're below a certain level than leaving them all in, and then we can decide what we want. You okay with that? Christopher, have you got any feeling?
Something I hadn't given a thought to. Actually, I can see the logic in asking for that, Mr. Chairman. So I'd be happy to endorse that request.
Okay. Everybody, Harry, you're happy with that? Okay, Matt, you say we need a proposal for this.
Yep. So if you're proposing, Christopher, was your endorsement a second? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, happy to do so.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just take a roll call vote on that. So Councillor Rest.
4.
Councillor Cushing.
4.
Councillor Blathwaite.
4.
And Councillor Butikofer.
4.
Okay, so that's unanimously agreed, and I'll add that to the work programme for future meeting.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I think we might find that quite a useful tool. I think that's the end of what we're doing, Matt, isn't it? We're at the last page?
Yeah, there's no further business.
No further business. Thank you all very much indeed. Next meeting is about 9th of March. So there should be some interesting papers coming forward by then. I haven't got anything else to say. Is anybody any final comments? No, we're happy with that. Thank you very much for all attending.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you very